Okay, here's a thought to start us off. What if the really deep problems of corruption and hypocrisy you see in, say, the Arab world and then in Hispanic regions, what if they're not so separate? What if they're actually like two sides of the same coin,
Yeah.
sharing some kind of common historical curse?
It's a pretty provocative idea, right?
Definitely. And that's what we're getting into today. This deep dive looks at a really fascinating analysis arguing exactly that this shared curse of corruption across these huge, seemingly different parts of the world.
Yeah, the analysis comes from this document, Maldition Hispano-Arabi.pdf. It offers a pretty unique take on how these things might be connected.
So our mission for you today is to sort of unpack the history here, how it looks today, and the frankly surprising things these regions seem to have in common when it comes to corruption, how it works, how people react. The author, Murad Aga, calls it a common plague. Okay, let's dive in.
So the core idea, maybe the most striking thing Murad Ako puts forward is this. He basically says that corruption in the Arab world and the Hispanic world, I mean, you're talking over 1.5 billion people, two coasts of the Atlantic. It's actually really hard to tell them apart.
Hard to tell apart. Wow.
Yeah, and he doesn't think it's just coincidence. He traces it back to this almost 800-year shared history between them.
800 years. So that long history has basically created a kind of identical uh, corruption DNA that survived all this time and distance. That's quite a claim.
It is bold. And he uses some really vivid language, doesn't hold back. He compares the 1001 Nights of Arab corruption with Hispanic corruption with a capital C.
Okay, Hispanic corruption with a capital C. What's the significance of that capital C, according to the author? Is it like more baked in, institutionalized, maybe?
I think that's exactly it. It suggests something really deep-seated, almost foundational. It's not just that it happens, but it's woven right into the system. And crucially, it's often zealously hidden, kept under wraps.
Which makes it harder to tackle than maybe more overt stuff.
That seems to be the implication. And yeah, the source does detail a spectrum. It goes from what he calls the most savage, like in Syria, to the most elegant and diplomatic, which he points to in Spain.
Elegant and diplomatic corruption, how does that work?
Well, he highlights Spain's approach, especially, when it's presenting itself internationally as this model of democracy and human rights. But he also notes that globalization is making this harder to hide. Information just flies around now, kind of exposing what he sees as this common curse.
This idea of a deep connection going back centuries, it leads us to a specific point in history the author really focuses on. 1492. We usually think Columbus, right? But how does Aga link 1492 to these patterns of corruption we're talking about?
Right. So for Murad Aga, 1492 isn't just Columbus. It's a really violent turning point. The Catholic monarchs kicking the Muslims out of the Iberian Peninsula.
A very violent expulsion.
Extremely. And he points out, this era saw terrible violence against other religions too. Jews, indigenous peoples over in the Americas, all justified, supposedly by religion, by the Holy Inquisition. Thousands died. Muslims, Jews, indigenous people labeled pagan.
And how does he contrast that with what was happening in the Arab world around that time or afterwards?
Well, his argument is quite stark. He says that Arabs since then kind of lost their religion to hypocrisy and corruption.
Yeah.
Sultans and princes using it for their own power, not really for God. But Jews, he notes, often maintained their religious identity as a minority, and many actually fled to the Islamic world.
Fled to the Islamic world, why?
Because, ironically perhaps, it was known back then for being relatively tolerant towards other Abrahamic faiths, Jews and Christians.
So it's this really interesting point he makes. Both the Arab Islamic world and the Hispano-Christian world, according to the source, used religion as a weapon to get rid of enemies. But the difference was the level of tolerance.
Exactly, the degree of tolerance. He argues the Arab Islamic world showed more coexistence back then. And this difference, he thinks, sets the stage for why corruption plays out differently today in these regions.
Okay, so how does that historical difference lead to different paths now? The document mentions two key factors, right?
Right. Two big reasons why things look different today. The first one is the enduring power of religion itself.
How so?
In the Islamic world, he argues, the religion disciplined by the Quran, which hasn't changed in over 14 centuries, it still has a very, very strong grip on society. It's a legacy, partly, from the Ottoman Empire, which ruled most Arab lands right up until Granada fell in 1492.
Okay, so religion remains a powerful force there. What about the Hispanic world?
Well, compare that to Christianity and Catholicism in Hispanic societies. The author argues it lost that kind of iron grip after things like the Spanish Armada being defeated by Protestant Britain, then the French Revolution pushing secularism, and the Industrial Revolution. All that kind of pushed religion into a parallel corner, as he puts it.
A parallel corner, meaning it didn't have that same medieval level control over everyday life and politics anymore.
Exactly. It wasn't governing society in the same totalizing way. So that's factor one, the different trajectories of religious influence.
And what's the second factor the document highlights? You mentioned colonialism earlier.
Yes. Factor two is the scars of colonialism and outside influence. After the Ottoman Empire fell apart, Arab lands mostly ended up under Christian protectorates, British, French, Italian, Spanish, and later Jewish control in Palestine.
Right.
And the author argues this created a kind of religious nationalist depression among Arabs.
Religious nationalist depression. What does he mean by that exactly? Like a collective despair tied to both faith and national identity.
Precisely. A deep sense of being wronged, religiously and nationally, by these Christian colonizers. And because they weren't treated with respect, he says, people doubled down on religion. It became the main refuge, the main tool for maybe fighting back someday.
And this is where it gets really interesting, according to the source, how outside powers learn to manipulate this situation.
Yes. This is key. He argues that the ex-colonizers, and he includes Israel here, figured out how to exploit both the existing corruption and this religious feeling. They use religion like a ball, he said.
A ball.
Like something to distract or to play with. They'd prop up dictators, give them power, let them use religion for legitimacy, while simultaneously labeling any genuinely religious opposition movements as terrorists.
So creating a convenient new enemy after the Cold War ended, replacing communism.
That's the argument. It keeps the dictators in line, dependent on external support. Now, compare that to the Hispanic world. Generally, after Spain left, these countries didn't face that same kind of continuous foreign domination.
There were exceptions, of course.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
The U.S. took parts of Mexico. Some Caribbean islands were colonized by Britain, France, the Netherlands. But largely, it wasn't the same widespread long-term protectorate system you saw in the Arab world.
Okay, so the Hispanic territories mostly avoided that continuous foreign rule after Spain. How did that difference, not having that constant external other, shape how they dealt with corruption compared to the Arab world's colonial baggage?
Well, it meant their internal dynamics played out differently. Without that external power to constantly react against or to push them back towards religion as the main source of identity and resistance, their frustrations with corruption tended to manifest differently.
How so? Where did the frustration go?
It often channeled into internal political ideologies, leading to quite different societal reactions when things got bad. Which brings us to the ripple effect, how these societies react to corruption today.
Right. So in Arab countries, the source says, massive corruption, where the powerful just swallow the whole economy, leads to this widespread social hatred and depression.
Yeah.
And feeling powerless against dictators, people turn back to religion.
Exactly. It becomes the ultimate refuge, the only perceived path for change, even if it's just spiritual solace or long-term hope.
But then you look at Hispanic countries, and the reaction is different. Because religion doesn't have that same overt force, he argues. High corruption there often pushes people towards, well, red revolutionary or communist-type movements.
Yeah, he points to examples like Cuba or the Chavista movement in Venezuela or Bolivarian socialism, basically more populist, leftist, sometimes revolutionary responses.
And he even notes this in Spain itself.
He does. He says that when corruption becomes really high profile and obvious in Spain, it tends to bring out these leftist, pro-communist, even Republican sentiments, which is especially interesting, he notes, because Spain's the only monarchy left among all those Hispanic countries.
So why the split? One turns to religion, the other turns to revolution, broadly speaking.
The author seems to suggest it's about where people place their ultimate hope or source of authority. If religion still holds that deep societal sway, it's the natural channel for resistance. If it's been pushed aside, people look for secular, often revolutionary ideologies to fix things when corruption gets unbearable.
It's fascinating how the reactions differ yet. The author argues the methods of the corrupt themselves, the actual playbook, are remarkably similar across both regions.
Eerily consistent, yeah. It's like there's a universal script for corruption.
Okay, let's unpack that playbook. The source lays out these common tactics. Tactic 1, just deny everything.
Vehement denial. Always. The politician or a powerful figure just says, nope, wasn't me, know nothing about it. Standard opening move.
Okay, but when the evidence starts trickling out,
Then comes tactic 2, blame shifting, what the author calls the ball effect.
the ball effect, like passing the buck.
Exactly. You find someone weaker to pin it on, or you try to split public opinion, create confusion. He calls it dizzying. And it works, he says, because the justice systems in these Hispano-Arab countries are often, well, super manipulated.
Manipulate how?
It buys time. Time to move money, hide assets, get your story straight, because you know the wheels of justice can be slowed down or pointed in a different direction.
And if they can't shift the blame, if they're cornered,
That's when they hit tactic 3, entering the justice bazaar.
the justice bazaar, that sounds cynical.
Extremely. The author flat out says, real justice often doesn't exist in these places. Decisions get bought, diverted, influenced. You end up with tailor-made sentences,
Tailor-made, like
lenient outcomes for the powerful.
Yeah.
He cites examples like what he calls the theatrical trials of Egypt's Hosni Mubarak, or certain cases involving high-ranking Spanish officials. It looks like justice, but the outcome is prearranged or heavily negotiated.
wow. So the rule of law isn't impartial, it's a marketplace. What does that do to ordinary people living in these systems?
It destroys trust, fundamentally. If justice can be bought, where does that leave the average person? They're vulnerable, with no real way to hold the powerful accountable. It just breeds cynicism and despair.
And that leads to the final tactic.
Tactic 4, yeah.
Yeah.
You actually start writing laws to protect the corrupt, granting more immunity, making it harder to prosecute them, while at the same time cracking down hard on whistleblowers.
Punishing the people trying to expose it.
Exactly. And this ranges wildly. He mentions the most savage and, he cites Syria, basically destroying a population to stay in power. Then there's organized crime assassinations, intimidation in the Middle East, South America.
And then the more diplomatic methods.
Right. Like in Spain, he argues, using the legal system itself to go after the businesses or livelihoods of people who accuse them, harassing them until they give up.
And the author provides a really personal, quite chilling example of this diplomatic kind of corruption, doesn't he, from his own experience?
He does, yeah. He talks about his own medical center and dental clinic in Ceuta, which is a Spanish city in North Africa. He alleges they were shut down because of a corruption case he was involved in, linked to the Popular Party, that's Spain's main center-right party. And he claims there was coordination even with socialist officials, who are usually their political rivals.
So different political sides working together to shut down someone exposing corruption?
That's his allegation. And it illustrates that point perfectly, how even in a place like Spain, part of the EU, the system, the law itself, can apparently be turned into a weapon to silence people and protect the powerful.
The results of all this corruption, whether it's savage or diplomatic, are just disastrous, according to the source. The gap between rich and poor explodes, the middle class vanishes, violence and crime hit record levels. It sounds like society just breaks down.
It's a complete erosion of the social fabric.
Yeah.
And the statistics he mentions are staggering.
Like what?
Well, this one really jumps out. Deaths from just regular crime in Hispano-America can actually be higher than the annual death tolls from wars in the Arab world.
More deaths from crime than from war. That's hard to comprehend.
And he adds that this crime is often self-financing, which leads to another point about global criminality.
Yeah, the source talks about this nexus. Drugs from Hispanic countries traded for weapons.
Right. Weapons that then fuel mafia violence and criminality there.
Yeah.
And similarly, in the Arab world, he points to powerful oil money being used to finance wars, crush movements like the Arab Spring, all to keep the corrupt elite in power. It's this interconnected web.
And it even affects countries that seem more stable. He mentions pseudo-democracy.
Yeah, this idea of pseudo-democracy, of spectacle. He argues that even countries that look democratic on the surface, maybe even allies or satellites of Western powers, are bringing in laws that stifle protests against corruption.
The spectacle, like it's all just for show. What's the point of that kind of democracy?
According to the author, it's performance. You go through the motions, elections, human rights talk, but it's designed to legitimize the corrupt regime, keep international critics happy, and crucially suppress any real challenge from below. All hidden behind these tired slogans of democracy and human rights while the corruption continues.
So this shared playbook, these tactics, it paints a pretty bleak picture of how power can be abused almost identically across these very different regions. It really suggests this curse has its own consistent logic.
Chillingly consistent, yeah.
Yeah.
A shared script, like you said.
So pulling this all together, what does it mean? We've explored this idea, based on Murad Aga's analysis, that corruption in the Hispano-Arab world is this unique and persistent curse. It makes them, in his words, banana republics and satellites, unable to really develop because, as he puts it, the tendency to steal clearly outweighs the desire to build.
It really leaves you with some tough questions the author poses, like why are millions of Arabs dying or fleeing lands that are incredibly rich in oil and other resources?
And why do over 93% of crimes in a country like Mexico just uninvestigated? How is that possible?
Or this one about Spain. Why does it have nearly 500,000 politicians, apparently needing no qualifications, just seductive language to win people over?
And maybe the billion-dollar question, literally, where did all those billions of euros from the European Union actually go? The money sent for infrastructure in Spain since they joined back in '86.
Yeah, the source asks that very directly, transparently. Where is it? All these questions suggest that this deep dive, really digging into Murad Aga's perspective. Well, we've only just scratched the surface.
Indeed. Feels like just the tip of the iceberg, doesn't it? Just the beginning of potentially 1,001 nights of these corruption stories.